Hello everyone and welcome back to the Lindores Abbey Rapid Challenge. We are continuing with the first semi-final match between Hikaru Nakamura and Magnus Carlsen. Magnus won game 1 and this is now game 2. Hikaru with the white pieces, he needs a win to get back into the match. But before we check it out, I would just like to make a very short shout out to this pair here. They sent me this. It's a video of them where he plays the piano while simultaneously playing against his girlfriend, and she's commentating on their game. So it's really crazy stuff. I don't know if anyone attempted it before, but if you're interested in checking out the entire video, I do recommend it. It will be the first link you see in the description below. So do check it out, and now let us return to the game. Now, Nakamura with the white pieces opens with e4. We have e5 by Magnus, knight f3, knight c6, and now bishop to b5. The Ruy Lopez is on the board, and now Magnus does go for the Berlin defense with knight to f6. Probably Nakamura would have gone for it too if it was played in the previous game. However, Magnus surprised him with the scotch. So d3, we have bishop to c5, and now a trade here. Captures, and now just knight b to d2. Continuing development, we already mentioned why you do not capture on e5. So bishop to g4, developing while pinning the knight here, and h3, asking do you want to capture or go back. So bishop to h5, and now there are a couple of moves that have been played here, but the move Nakamura plays, a3, is a new move, so already as of move 8 we have a completely new game. Magnus continues with knight to d7. Now you want to further defend this pawn. You want to play f6, you want to bring your king to safety and just keep the position very solid. Nakamura goes g4, advances the pawn on the king side, bishop to g6, and also b4. So not a lot of time will you see something like this, a3 b4 followed by h3 g4. So pushing the bishop back, we have bishop to d6, and now knight to c4, putting pressure on the bishop, but actually the knight is just coming to a5 to put pressure on b7 and c6. So f6 by Magnus, it's a standard move in the Berlin, and knight to a5 now, putting pressure on b7 and not allowing b6, since then you lose the c6 pawn. So Magnus defends it, we have queen to c8, and now knight to h4, again putting pressure on the bishop, but this knight is actually just coming to f5, which will be an excellent outpost for the knight. So we have knight to f8, defending the bishop. If the bishop is captured, then the knight can recapture on g6, also then the knight will have access to the f4 square, but Nakamura just shifts the knight over to f5, and if you trade here, then Nakamura gets a nice semi-open file for his rook. So knight to e6, Magnus now also has eyes on d4 and f4, which will be some good squares for his knight, and bishop to e4, developing and also helping out with control of those squares. We have king to f7, Magnus now wants to castle artificially by shifting the rook into the game and playing king g8, and c3 now, adding another defender to b4, but also taking away the d4 square from Carlsen's knight. We have rook to e8, now almost finished, castling artificially, and now h4 by Nakamura, preparing h5 to force a trade here. So king to g8, freeing up the f7 square for the bishop, and now h5, attacking that bishop. We have bishop to f7, and now queen to f3, getting the queen into the game. And here Magnus finds a very nice move that allows him to gain some activity with b6. And here Magnus is just offering the c6 pawn, so if you capture it, problem is if you capture it, then queen d7, you have to play b5, and it's a very committal move, and Nakamura isn't sure if he wants to commit all the way. Could be a weak pawn after a6, it's hard to decide if this is good or bad. So instead, Nakamura goes back with the knight to c4, he doesn't go for the c6 pawn, and now bishop back to f8, not allowing the capture to happen on d6, and also the bishop from f8 will serve as a nice defender of the king's side. So Nakamura castles here, and now a5, now finally getting that breakthrough as the knight is no longer blocking black's a pawn. We have queen to g3 by Nakamura, putting a lot of pressure here on Carlsen's king side, and you have to take a lot of things into consideration. Maybe some sacrifices are possible with the knight, maybe with the bishop, maybe h6. So a lot of things to consider. But Magnus just goes a captures on b4 first. We have c captures on b4, and now h6, not allowing Nakamura to push the h or the g pawn. and now rook f to d1, preparing to bust open the position with the d4, as you really want to get rid of this backwards d3 pawn. So Magnus first goes b5, kicks away the knight, knight to d2, and then now c5. So just advancing that pawn. Magnus also gets rid of his double c pawn. B captures, and now we have bishop captures on c5 by Magnus. We have captures, now putting pressure on the d3 pawn. And here Nakamura should go d4 right away. It's an excellent opportunity. The e4 pawn is defended by the knight, so you just need to get rid of your backwards d3 pawn. However, Nakamura goes knight to f3 first. And now it's a bit of a problem. Now Carlsen gets queen to d7 in, and now you no longer have d4, as nothing will guard your e4 pawn. So you have to decide whether you want to defend it with knight to e1. Now, okay, the d3 pawn will be defended 3 times, or you want to do it like Nakamura with king to h2, which defends the d3 pawn with a tactic. Now if Magnus captures it, now knight e1 just picks up the knight, since it's now attacked 3 times. So instead, after king to h2, we have bishop to e6, and now Nakamura has to figure out how to continue this game. He goes for rook a to c1, brings the rook to a more active file, now attacks the knight here on c5, but now Magnus just goes knight to b3. Puts pressure on the rook, but what he's actually doing is preventing the rook from reaching the a1 square, and now Nakamura loses the a3 pawn. So rook to c3, and rook captures on a3 now by Magnus, and the situation on the clock is 2.5 minutes Nakamura, 4 minutes for Magnus. Nakamura now finally gets his d4 move in. d5 would be excellent if he can get that in. However, here Magnus has a few very good options. He could go c5. c5 is interesting since you can't really do any captures. The rook would be hanging here. And after d5, you can just capture here, and after whichever pawn recaptures, now you have b4, and now you have 2 connected pass pawns here, which will be very strong. So after d4, Magnus decides not to go for c5, but rather b5 first. And now already that's a very strong pass pawn. You're challenging the rook, and also after the rook moves, you just want to capture this pawn, since the pawn will now be guarding the rook here on a3. So rook cd3, and the knight captures on d4. Very nice idea. Now Nakamura captures, knight 3 captures on d4, e captures on d4, and you cannot go for captures with the rook because the queen would hang on g3. So here what you do is either capture by the knight, but if you capture with the knight, then you just get rook captures on d3, queen captures and bishop captures on g4, puts pressure on the rook here, and it's just much better. It is winning for black, as the 2 connected pass pawns would be unstoppable. So here after bishop captures, after e captures on d4, we have rook captures on a3 by Nakamura, b captures on a3, and now, only now, rook captures on d4, attacking Carlsen's queen. And Carlsen finds the very interesting queen to b5, which is pretty much the only move that gives black the advantage. He offers both the c pawn and the a3 pawn. However, capturing either isn't all that great, because if you capture the a3 pawn, then you just get bishop captures on f5, and white cannot recapture the bishop, because if you recapture, then queen to e5 check picks up the rook here on d4. So that would be a problem. So instead, Nakamura grabs the c7 pawn. At least now he will only have the a3 pawn to worry about. And now Magnus goes in for the kill. So what would you play here? Feel free to pause the video and try to find the best move for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting that it is very, very important to eliminate the knight. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's bishop captures on f5. And now, doesn't matter what Nakamura recaptures with, e captures on f5 was played, and now just queen to b2. And now there is very little Nakamura can do against a2 and a1. This pawn is becoming a queen. You don't have time for something like rook to d7 to go after g7 pawn, because the f2 pawn is hanging as well. So that's not possible. You're going to get mated. So here Nakamura finds a very interesting tactic on how to defend. Queen to c4 check, king to h8, and now king to g3, defending the f2 pawn. But now Magnus does get a2 in. But this was Nakamura's idea. Queen to a4. And now, of course, if you continue by promoting the pawn, which I hope none of you were considering, you get just rook, queen captures rook on e8, check, king here, check here, and rook to d8 will be checkmate. So Magnus doesn't fall for this. Of course, he goes for queen to b8 goes back queen to b8. And now the problem is you don't really have much options here. It comes with check, so you first have to react to this. But it was also in this position that Hikaru Nakamura resigned the game. Why did he resign? Well, there is nothing more to be done here. Since once you deal with this, let's say you move the king, king h3, just queen a8, and the next move, either the queen moves and then you bring another queen into the game, or you trade here and still the pawn will queen. There's no way for you to stop this. So, really wild stuff, and really impressive how Magnus got all of this going at this point. This was the crucial idea. Let me just find it here. Nope, and that's not where the crucial idea was. Here, just this very interesting b6 move, just a beautiful pawn sacrifice that allowed Hikaru to be bold and go after the c6 pawn, but Hikaru went back, and then it was just a very simple development for Magnus. So yeah, it was this point that things started to go wrong for Hikaru, but that's how it is in chess. You have to make a decision. If you make a wrong decision, then it will, of course, an opponent like Magnus will take advantage of this. So yeah, once again, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. Do check out the video. I mentioned that the link is in the description below. The first thing you will see, first time I've seen someone simultaneously play the piano and play a chess game. So do check it out. And also I would like to thank Mark Thompson, Christopher Liver, Sean Owen, Mark Pompeo, and Jean-Francois Bond for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Lindores Abbey Rapid Challenge, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.